start with a little bit of GPU news. So it's looking like AMD's RX 7900 class of GPUs might be getting 20 gigabit per second memory modules, if you believe this random Digimon on the internet. Well, again, he's not random. He tweets a lot of stuff about GPU news, has had things correct in the past. So again, tag this as rumor. But the rumor is now that at least the 7900 series will be 20 gigabit per second with memory. Previously, we'd seen rumors of 18 gigabit per second memory, so this is a bit of an upgrade from that. And he says he doesn't know about the rest. Now, according to the videocards.com article on this, that with the rumored 384-bit memory bus and now 20 gigabit per second memory modules, that would give you 960 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. But remember that AMD relies heavily on infinity cache to kind of multiply that bandwidth. So the actual results would be, better than what we'd see here. Although we still don't have exact figures on how much infinity cache we would see here. There are rumors and all of that. And again, I think the 384-bit bus is coming from some sources, including the Red Gaming Tech information, which is being reported in this video cards article, which I've already reported in the past. But again, Red Gaming Tech did not seem completely certain about all of this. So again, we shouldn't completely assume this is what's happening. But according to him, the Navi 31 SKU would have several 7900 and above class chips. And again, this rumor would now be saying that it would be that series getting the 20 gigabit per second. Now notice that Greymon saying 7900 series here would kind of imply that it is correct that we would have more than one 7900 class chip. So that's at least a little bit interesting. And again, current rumors are pointing towards a November launch for the high-end SKUs here first. Now, let's jump over to something I think is a bit more concrete and less just rumor mill, although this is still based on, unreleased product. But it looks like Extreme Player over at Bilibili has access to the 13600K and 13700K upcoming CPUs from Intel. Now, he's compared them, and I already reported on him comparing these in synthetic and productivity benchmarks. But what about gaming? We have some gaming benchmarks now. Now, the reason why, the gaming performance here might not be great, and we'll get into what it is in just a second, is, I don't mean not great, but I mean the leap from generation to generation might not be huge, is that the main upgrade to the 13th gen compared to the 12th gen is increasing the number of efficiency cores. So like we're seeing the 12600K had 4 efficiency cores. Now the 13600K has 8 efficiency cores. The 12700K had 4 efficiency cores. The 13700K has 8 efficiency cores. And the 12900K had 8 efficiency cores. And the 13900K has 16 efficiency cores. That's going to help a lot in multi-threaded workloads, but those aren't the cores that are really giving you your gaming performance boost. So with that in mind, the gaming performance is mostly just going to be boosted from clock speed increases, where we can see some small but noticeable clock speed increases from generation to generation here. Unfortunately, this increase in clock speed and core count is also driving up the power draw, at least at the higher power draw levels for these CPUs, which is a little bit unfortunate. In terms of the actual architecture of the chip, other than the clock speed increase, there's not much to help gaming performance other than an L2 cache increase, which can help. Now let's jump into the actual charts here, and unfortunately these charts are really hard to look at least the ones that are published by Extreme Player in his review. And to be clear, these are at least late engineering samples or possibly qualification samples, so this should be pretty close to the final results we get from this chip, but again, this is not an actual on-the-shelf product yet, so we'll still want to see official reviews when these chips come out, but I would expect pretty similar results. Now, if you're looking at this chart, and I'll get you a summary of this that's a little bit easier to look at, but if we jump into the full chart, this is the 13600K versus the 12600KF game test summary. So when we look at each of these results, the gray bar and the yellow bar are the 12600K, paired with DDR4 on the gray line and DDR5 memory on the yellow line. Then we have the blue line and the orange line as the 13600K with DDR4 and then DDR5 respectively. So there's a lot of information here, but it does make it very hard to look at. They've tested CSGO, Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker, PUBG, Naraka, Apex Legends, Forza Horizon 5 seem to see less change, less improvement on the generation here, whereas some of the other games saw more significant changes. Notice that we're seeing minimum, maximum, and average tested here at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K in all of these games. Monster Hunter Rise, Far Cry 6, Red Dead Redemption 2, Horizon Zero Dawn, and then the 3D Mark scores are still thrown in here as well. We've got all of this information also for the 13700K versus the 12700KF, and again, note that it has both DDR4 and DDR5 results on these charts. Now, you'll notice that in certain games, certain things, especially like minimum performance, has increased dramatically. But again, there's a lot to look at here. What can we take from this? Well, luckily, on Twitter, I believe it was, Harukaze5719 did a nice summary for us. Now, the only downside to this summary chart is that this was only using DDR4 results rather than the DDR5 results. But this is comparing DDR4 12600K versus DDR4 13600K in the gaming benchmarks, and we can see an average for each resolution. So FHD here is full HD, that's 1080p, if you're not clear on your, what is that, an acronym? And then QHD would be 1440p, and then we have 4K up here. Of course, as usual with CPU testing, the higher the resolution, the more likely you are to be bottlenecked by your GPU and not utilizing the full performance of the CPU. So the 1080p results are the most likely to show us the actual increase in the ability of the CPU to run games, although in your actual gaming, if you're GPU limited, you won't actually see this increase, in your gaming performance if you buy the new CPU, because most of the time you'll probably be GPU limited, depending on your exact situation, games, and all of that. So it looks like the minimums, average, and maximum frame rates are all going up between 10 to 12, maybe 13% on the 1080p results. So I would take that as our best idea on what our gaming increase is for these. It looks like a little bit over 10% in gaming performance increase from the 12th gen to the 13th gen on the 600K class chips. It looks like at 1440p, while we're seeing the minimum results go up around 10%, your average and maximum results are showing much smaller percentage gains because, again, you're more likely to be GPU limited a lot of the time, despite the extremely high-end GPU that they used here. Keep in mind, this was using a 3090 Ti on these results. So these are definitely high-end GPUs here. At 4K, again, the minimums are showing that 10 or 11% gain, whereas the 4K averages and maximum results are staying within a couple percent, again, because you're more likely to be GPU limited. On the 13700K versus the 12700K, and again, this is using the DDR4 memory, we're seeing similar results, where the 1080p average result actually didn't see quite as large of a gain. We're seeing about 7.5%, whereas the minimum results went up 13.5%, and the maximum results, which I don't think are that interesting, go up almost 10%. At 1440p, we're seeing the minimum results going up 7.5%, averages about 5% and 6% for the maxes, and at 4K, once again, your average results are only about 2.5%. The maximum results went up a bit, but again, that's maximum frame rates aren't that interesting. The minimum frame rates coming up is always a good deal, though, and again, that's around that 11.4%. So overall, I would say that this is good evidence that between the clock speed increases and the increase in cache, we'll be seeing a 10 to 12, 13% increase in gaming performance when you're completely CPU limited, and that the minimum frame rates coming up across the board is always a good thing to help smooth out those dips, even at the higher resolutions. So overall, I've got to say, you know, this isn't mind-blowing increases or anything like that, but there you go. It is an increase and looks, you know, to be reasonable. You wouldn't want to upgrade from a 12th to a 13th gen, but if you're going to be jumping in with a new PC, you might want to consider 13th gen. However, AMD will be firing off with the 7000 series of Ryzens, and we now have our first kind of leaked out into the wild, some sort of an engineering sample chip out there. Now, unfortunately, this is on the User Benchmark website. If you are unfamiliar with User Benchmark's CPU results, it's generally very biased and doesn't line up with the results that you see from other websites and reviews, and oftentimes is, let's just say, incredibly Intel skewed on how it weights its results. Now, in this, we're seeing the 7600X 6-core, well, okay, it's a 6-core Raphael CPU, meaning it's probably going to be called the 7600X, although I don't think we have that official naming yet. And it's saying up to 22% faster than the Core i9-12900K in single-core test. Now, basically, I think the best way to look at this is once again Harukaze coming to the rescue by turning all of this data, which feel free to look at, into a nice little chart here, where we basically look at the single thread versus the multi-thread performance here of a 5600X, 7600X engineering sample. So again, we don't know if the final silicon could perform better than this, depending on how early this engineering sample happens to be. But again, we'll also see it up against a 12900K and 12600K. We can see that the single-threaded performance is a massive jump compared to the 5600X and a significant lead over the 12900K. But if you, again, look at the multi-threaded results, of course, the Intel chips are still going to lead because they have all those efficiency cores to help out. But the single-threaded performance is going to indicate a lot towards gaming performance, although this is a synthetic benchmark, not a gaming benchmark. So do keep that in mind. But overall, this does look like a decent jump here. But again, this is an engineering sample, and it's user benchmark. So, like, okay, just to give you guys an idea, I scrolled down through the comments here, and I was sure I would see this, and it looks like it's here. It looks like User Benchmark has already changed their weighting system to weight this more heavily towards Intel. So if you looked at it now, it weights it more heavily again towards Intel. So anyway, look up my issues with user benchmarks and other places. I don't need to get hung up there. But anyway, it's nice to see 7600X results, but I'm not going to hang anything too heavy on what we're seeing from user benchmark, and I'll leave it at that. Now, how about Intel Arc? So first of all, we'd been hearing that a lot of rumors out there that Intel was just going to be abandoning their Arc GPUs. And Raja Kaduri, who is in charge of, Intel Arc over at Intel, is crushing this, just saying we're very much committed to our roadmap. So, I mean, that doesn't mean that they couldn't end up canceling it anyway, despite him saying that, but he is very, very much responding to these rumors, saying, we are very much committed to our roadmap. We are ramping Alchemist and will continue to improve the experience. You will see more updates from us this quarter. AXG is also on track to ramp 4 new product lines by the end of the year. And so basically, there's no official confirmation from Intel that they're planning any sort of dropping their Arc lineup here. Now, a lot of the issues stem from the graphics drivers, but I'll just mention that they did just get another graphics driver update, which is fixing a lot of issues. So it's nice to see that they are continuing to solve problems, although there are still many known issues, including just bad performance on older games that are especially on older APIs, earlier than DX12 and Vulkan, that type of thing. Now, we are seeing some leaked benchmarks here. We're seeing, and sorry, you can probably hear my kids running around upstairs. They woke up early this morning. I usually film my videos before they wake up. Anyway, Intel Arc A770M scores higher than GeForce RTX 3060M and 3D Mark TimeSpy. So what are we specifically seeing here? Basically, you have to be really careful with the TimeSpy results when you're looking at Intel Arc GPU results, because they offer an advanced performance optimization. In other words, they cheat unless you turn off the cheats on 3D Mark results. So you have to be very careful with this. So the nice thing here is we have an A770M result with APO off, which would be more of the fair result. And then we have a 730M result with APO on. We have an A550 result with APO on. So some of these aren't great, but at least the one with APO off should be a somewhat reasonable result. And we're seeing the A770M beating a RTX 3060M, but it is behind the RTX 3070M. So the A770M should be this top-end mobile chip from the Arc series. Now, keep in mind that even though this is not the cheating result, the gaming results will line up to this when they're the games that are actually optimized well for Arc. The issue is that many games are not optimized well for Arc, and that's your problem. So the games that actually run well should be beating a 3060M and almost, but really not that close to a 3070M. But then there'll be many games that significantly underperform, and that's kind of the what we're seeing there. Now, in the again, talking about, okay, these GPUs really are launching, and when are they launching? According to Igor's lab, he's still seeing that the launch dates should be between the 5th of August and going through the 29th of September. His official announcement, so again, to be clear, Igor's lab is not officially Intel giving us this results, but he often has a lot of insider information. So he's saying if they're going to stick to their current time frame, the range that's being collocated, I'm wondering if this is supposed to be communicated to me now, is between August 5th and September 29th. That would be enough time to launch their 3 announced larger models, one slice at a time. So basically we would be seeing something coming out around August 5th, but then, wait a couple weeks, launch another one, wait a couple weeks, launch another one, that kind of a thing. Their internal documents are no longer reporting a large-scale joint launch event, but it could be a kind of silent launch, which would be carried out gradually in the retail sector and via only a few media. In other words, they might only just launch some review samples to particular media outlets rather than having some giant event. We'll see how it goes, but that's currently what we're seeing for the launch dates. Now, we are also seeing that it looks like ASUS and MSI will be offering Intel Arc products in their desktops, because up until now we'd only seen the Gunner Photon cards coming out of China. So it was interesting to see who would be taking on some of the Arc GPU production and all of that. So we're at least seeing some desktops being listed from ASUS and MSI with Arc GPUs in them. Now, speaking of ASUS, but this time also NZXT, we're seeing reports of some companies laying off employees with inflation and the big, online boom of the COVID pandemic stuff. I think a lot of chip manufacturers aren't, raking in the profits quite how they were with the crypto boom and everything. So we're seeing reports of some companies laying off some employees, although we could end on some good news. If you're waiting for a Steam Deck like I am, it looks like Valve is saying, great news, everyone who currently has a reservation can get their Steam Deck by the end of this year. We've cleared up supply chain issues. A bunch of folks got moved up to Q3. I checked on mine. Mine still says Q4. And Q4 means, I think, starting in October. Q3 would mean that you should get yours before October. For clarity, Q3 is July through September, and Q4 is October through December. And it says no reservations were moved from the Q3 window to Q4. The only movement was from after Q3 into Q3, or clarifying quarter 4. Anyway, I'd like to actually get my hands on a Steam Deck and maybe do reviews on the channel, but I also just kind of want one. Anyway, I hope all of you have an excellent day.